Hello everybody and welcome back to the Alien vs Predator Galaxy podcast. This is regular co-host Corporal Hicks, aka Aaron Percival, and joining me are usual partners in crime, Ridgetop.
Hey again everyone.
And Xenomorphin.
Hola.
And we're also joined by a special guest, members of the community and particularly the forum will know him as Ultramorph.
Hey, how you doing?
You're also on most of the Facebook groups as well, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
I don't know if you want to go with your real name for that.
Yeah, so it's all over Facebook. I'm Mike Green.
And if Ultramorph's presence hasn't clued you in, it means we're going to be doing a comic episode. Because I always love to bring Ultramorph on for the comic ones.
Yeah, I like to be on the comic ones. That's kind of my main point of interest at this point with the series, so it's always good to be on to discuss.
And he's normally beating me to posting the solicitations on the board as well.
Yeah, you beat me to it this week for Resistance or whatever that current one is called.
Rescue. I mistakenly reported it as Resistance. I was like, oh shit. Went back and fixed everything.
I gotta say the new cover art for that looks awesome.
Yes.
For Rescue number 2.
Yeah. I want a poster of that. That's like one of the best covers that isn't Tristan Jones the last like 5 years.
Well, it's very reminiscent of Covenant.
Yeah, the Covenant poster. That's what I thought about. It's like the Covenant poster, but with that Aliens feel.
Yeah, with Conestalga ship at the bottom. And that actually reminded me of Liam Sharp's cover for Fast Track to Heaven.
That's what it reminded me of too, yeah.
So, yeah, that was cool. But no, we're not future talking Rescue or anything here. We're actually going to be chatting the last full Alien series to come out, which, as of recording, is Aliens Dust to Dust. It might be William Gibson's Alien 3 by the time I finished editing this, but that will be a topic for another episode. So, yes, this is episode 83, and we're going to be talking Gabriel Hardman's Aliens Dust to Dust. It finished its 4-issue run a good few months ago. When was it? Was it February?
Was it? Or was it January? I know it was this year.
Yeah.
The last one was up.
And we've actually been meaning to do this one for a while now, but it just getting pushed back with a lot of like the current news kind of things, with like Blackout's release and the Isolation Digital series release. But we finally got there. We've got there. Before we start then, shall we just read the synopsis for the series? Obviously, there are going to be spoilers talked about here, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then, come back later. But just as a recap, here is the synopsis. And I think this is for issue 1, but I think it can apply for the whole series here. From master storyteller Gabriel Hardman, a terrifying examination of why we fear the xenomorphs. In deep space, the Trono colony on the planet LV-871 finds itself under attack by mysterious and deadly creatures of unknown origin. Emergency evacuations are ordered and shuttles are taken off as the massacre sweeps the colony. All that stands between 12-year-old Maxon and his mum making it to the safety of the spaceport, is a horde of aliens. You'll be gripping the edge of your seat as a mother and son fight for their lives against the deadliest monsters in the galaxy. So, short reviews then before we get into the specifics. As the guest, Ultramorph, do you want to lead us off? What did you think of Dust to Dust?
Yeah, I liked it overall. I thought it was a nice little self-contained story. I thought the art had some really great moments. It has some great-looking xenomorphs, and it was definitely interesting to a main character who was a child. It was a little reminiscent of Newt, so I thought that was a fun. I don't think it's groundbreaking, but I had fun with it.
A xenomorphin?
Yeah, picking up on Newt, I did feel it was like a bit like Newt's Tale comic. It's meant to be told from the perspective of the child, but I don't that was conveyed well enough. I thought it started out interesting, couple of wasted opportunities in it. It's basically an A to Z survival story, so I liked it, but I had some problems with it. But yeah, it's a likable comic.
Okay, Rich Stop.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty self-contained story. Like, it felt like short, compared to some of the other comics. But I liked it. It was an interesting survival tale that focused on this kid that was just going through horrific experience after experience. Again, spoilers in this podcast if you haven't read it yet, but he loses his mother at the end of the first issue, and that kind of becomes an important theme going through the comic. It wasn't great, but it was good. It was a solid comic for me, and I definitely will be picking up the paperback when it comes out.
Just a side tangent here already before I share my thoughts, but would you pick up a trade for a series you didn't actually enjoy?
It would depend if it had aspects about it I enjoyed, like if I really liked the artwork about it. There's some comics out there, like just weird ones like Deadliest of the Species that are kind of cool to have, even though they're, not the best.
So you wouldn't pick them up for like the behind the scenes kind of stuff, perhaps?
Well, it depends how extensive that would be. I know for what's the one that's getting the big hardcover coming out recently? Defiance. The one that we all loved. No, it was
Life and Death.
No, it wasn't the Prometheus one. It was an alien story with like the retro artwork.
Oh, Dead Orbit?
Yeah, that's right, Dead Orbit. I keep getting that confused with that little comic Dead Space that came out with one of the DVDs.
I can't even remember Dead Space. I can only ever remember Sandtrap.
It was a very short, Sandtrap was longer, but it was a very short, I know I'm on a tangent here, but very short AvP comic. I actually really liked, and I do hope that some of those harder to find comics like Sandtrap or Dead Space find a release. I do think it's time for AvP Omnibus 3, so just throw that out there, and we'll get back to Dust to Dust. But anyway, yes, I would buy a series that I wasn't crazy about, but honestly, I did like this. Maybe I'm selling it like it was leaning towards great for me. Just didn't quite get there, but it was still one of the more solid comics in recent memory.
I was going to say, surely because I know we've both brought The Predator, even though we are slowly despising it more and more. So I thought that would have been a bit of a funny.
Well, you kind of have to separate the expanded universe from the main films right now. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think Force is just kind of killing it right now, or do you think it's still not quite up to their golden age days?
Yeah, I mean, I like they're putting out some solid books right now. I'm kind of waiting for the next big thing. I like that we've gotten Dead Orbit and now Dust to Dust and sort of smaller, self-contained. It's cool that they're doing what appears to be a stealth Amanda Ripley ongoing. But I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for the next big thing.
You think they are ever going to conclude the Life and Death Fire and Stone arc?
As soon as Disney cancels the new Alien sequel, yes. But how soon that'll be, I don't know. Yeah.
See, I can't say I enjoy Covenant. I know I'm a bit of an outlier here, but aside from the alien stuff, funnily enough, in Covenant, I really enjoy that film. So
I like it up to the point where David appears. All the stuff up to the point, and then it kind of goes down.
Aside from the second and third act or anything alien related in the Alien movie, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
I dislike.
Yeah, it's a great Prometheus. It's a great Prometheus sequel till a crappy CG Xenomorph shows up.
But I do enjoy that film. But I have been so enjoying the expanded universe of late.
As have I. Yeah, the novels. What do you think, Aaron? Are the Titan or Dark Horse killing it the most right now?
I feel like you've got to give it to Titan purely for the Cold Forge. I think that eclipses anything Dark Horse has done lately, or the other Titan books, which I'm sorry to say because I do actually quite like the Rage War, but I think the Cold Forge is at a completely whole other level.
Yeah, Titan's doing really interesting stuff, especially with books like David's drawings and stuff like that. And I'm looking forward to like the Blueprints book that's supposed to be coming out later this year. Some of their art books have felt a little lacking, the Covenant art book and the art for the Predator. Like there was just so much that went into the conceptual designs for that movie that was left out of those. And you look back to the Prometheus art book, which was just incredible. So I would like to see their making movies books improve a little bit. But as far as the novels go, and as far as some of the other book releases go, Titan and Dark Horse as well have both been doing really well.
Well, and the new behind the scenes of Alien book that's coming out by Jonathan Rinsley.
Yes, I've heard high praises for that one, so maybe that'll shut me up.
Well, he's supposed to have done really good work on Apes and Star Wars.
I haven't read those making of books, but yeah, I hear they're pretty well regarded.
Anyway, we're already digressing. First tangent of the episode. So, my turn. I pretty much agree with you guys. I think it was a solid story. I don't think it was quite up there with Dead Orbit, but I do think it was, it was a solid, entertaining read. There are a couple of issues with it, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but it is another one where I've really, really enjoyed just the straightforwardness of it, but also a lot of the artwork. Like Dead Orbit, like Hunters 2, there's just been so many panels in it that I would happily have, printed out and framed and up on the wall. So that alone gives it a fair few points in my books, especially when a lot of the problems I have with the older runs are I don't always quite like the artwork in them. I suppose more specifically the colouring in them, but lately it's just solid run after solid run. Should we talk specifics then? What should we start with? Should we start with the big thing?
The inherited traits thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the theme of the overall comic, isn't it? Like that's really the biggest question that this comic presents, I think. And I do think it's ambiguous enough. I know when we were interviewing Gabriel in one of our previous podcasts, was that like 2 podcasts ago or something?
I think that was 81. You
were saying that you felt like the question had been answered by the end of issue 4, but he rebutted that. He said he meant for it to be ambiguous, and even though that this alien attacks the queen at the end, it's still very much an open question because there's a scene earlier in that issue where she pounces him, and you don't know if she was attacking him or what was going on. I thought the question was interesting. I mean, I've remembered thinking about that question for long before this comic. They talk about genetic memory and alien resurrection even. And so having that idea kind of explored a little bit was, I think, honestly, the comic's strongest point. I know some people don't like that idea at all of maybe like a pseudo kind of, I guess, reincarnation in terms of like...
Explain it fully, just in case.
Okay, so... Like I was saying in the beginning of this podcast, the boy who we follow here, the main character Maxon, his mother is infected in the first issue, and by the end of the first issue is killed by a chest burster. Now this alien, as it's growing, becomes a recurrent alien that's following this group of survivors over this story. And there's a couple of instances where it protects the boy, where it could have killed him.
Implies.
Yeah, and implied to protect the boy because like you'll see like maybe another human character gets in an argument or something or takes something away from him, and then the alien will kill that person. And some of the other characters pick up on this as well in the story, and they argue maybe they should leave the boy behind because the alien is following them because of the boy. And then later, the boy seems to be confident. He's like, oh, she won't attack me, but then it pounces him, but we don't really know if it was attacking him or not. And then at the end, as he's making his escape, the queen alien shows up. And this alien who was birthed from his mother comes in and attacks the queen, and that allows him to escape. So that's kind of the gist of it.
You're right in that it is very much the aspect of this series that it will be known as. Dust to Dust is going to be that series where the alien inherits the mother's, or seems to inherit the mother's, sort of person,
emotional connection to the boy or whatever.
Whichever way you want to do it. So you were cool with it? You were okay with this one? This aspect?
I mean, I kind of take Gabriel at his argument. I think it was left ambiguous enough. I don't think that question was definitively answered, even though it kind of initially seemed like it for us. I always like it when the aliens have a bit more personality, even something with like grid and AvP, but taking that to behavior rather than just physical traits. Like I think it's an interesting question. So yeah, personally, I was cool with it.
What about you, Ultramorph? What was your stance on that particular aspect of the lore in this?
Yeah, I'm not terribly bothered by it either because it's like we said. I mean, yes, it seemingly attacks the queen at the end, allowing him to get in the ship and get away. But we don't see what would have happened next if there hadn't been a ship. He'd stayed, but would have continued attacking the queen, or what would have happened. So I mean, it's ambiguous enough that I don't necessarily have much of an issue with it. And yeah, I mean, I like any story going back to Labyrinth where we see a little more intelligence or something. Just something a little more going on with the aliens, in that big old head of theirs. So I thought it was cool. I mean, it's certainly going to be on every list for the next 5 to 10 years of most controversial moments in an alien story. But yeah, I mean, I'm okay with it. Like a lot of stuff in the series, maybe they could have explored it a little more. But it was fine. Yeah, I'm not mad about it.
Now, Xenomorphin, I know you are going to disagree with the ambiguity assessment. So, what did you think?
Well, I'm in sort of two camps here because, as a concept, when you guys interviewed the guy behind this, it's like you said, it's been a concept that has been around for a long time. Fandom has theorized purely speculatively that maybe the reason the original alien acted like it did towards Lambert was either because Kane had a thing for Lambert or because it emerged from a male host, and maybe it was even more basic than that. I like playing around with that as a concept because, as Ridgetop mentioned in Alien Resurrection, one of the interesting things I liked about Resurrection is that it brought up that factor of genetic memory. And once you raise that gets very interesting in terms of storytelling potential. What I disliked about it was how, in that last sequence, it was executed. Also, just before I get onto that, I will say I would have, it comes out of the boy's mother. I would have preferred it if we had not seen the obvious thing of her being face hugged. I would have preferred it that she was just woken up and we had no idea, because then the chest burst would have become that much more of a surprise to us. Once you see a character that's face hugged, you know what's going to happen. It wasn't the payoff wasn't there as much as it could have been. And also going back to that in terms of the alien protecting it, there was an earlier scene where a different alien came up to the mother when we know she's impregnated, and it didn't attack her, but it sort of just turned away. I thought that was a moment which was what I say about squandered moments. I think that was a point where that should have attacked the boy, and it didn't, and it had no reason not to try and abduct the boy. But we come to the end of the story, and it's Hardman, he mentioned in the interview you guys did that he wanted it to be very ambiguous. And my problem with it was that it was anything but ambiguous. Ambiguity is when you use in the process of storytelling, it's deliberately framed so that you have at least two possibilities and the audience has no idea which one is the true answer. There are two moments in Aliens where it happens. There's the moment where Ferro in the dropship is attacked. Cameron has since talked about it was deliberate. You don't know whether the alien deliberately attacked her as a threat or it was just the dropship crashed because it was trying to abduct her and it had no idea. And the other part is, of course, the moment where they cut the power. Did the power go out because they were just tunneling through the cables, or did they deliberately do it because they came out of hosts who would have had knowledge of, power systems and electricity? Did they do it because of one or the other? We as the audience don't know, but we've thrived for decades now on making theories up about it. Here, I think what would have been interesting is if you had several aliens approach the boy, and you had the one that didn't have an arm, which was how we knew it was the one that had emerged from his mother. If it had sort of got in front of them, turned to them and hissed at them, we wouldn't have known if it was hissing a warning them away, or if it was just communicating something, and then the boy uses that as a way to get away. That's ambiguity. What we have here is the boy is, he's in the midst of the hive. You see several normal aliens turning towards him. The queen is there. The queen is actually not a threat because there's no reason to assume she's separated from her egg sac. She's just sitting there laying eggs, I assume. She's got no reason to have separated from it. So she's actually not a threat. The threats are all the other adult aliens. But what we see is this one-armed alien. It literally leaps on her back like a rodeo bull riding thing. It looks silly. I forgive it a bit more because it's in a comic. In a live action, it would not have worked at all, I think. But there is no other way to interpret that scene. It's explicit. It is anything but ambiguous. It leaps on the Queen. There's no reason for it to attack her other than protectiveness. I would have loved it if it was ambiguous, but the method the writer used to make it, is it protecting him? There's no other way to explain that. That's what I didn't like about it. And the fact that it did look a bit silly to me anyway, to see an alien jumping on a back of a queen and trying to ride her like a bull. To me, that just didn't work. But as an ambiguity thing, it just did not work. So I wish that had been changed. There are other moments in it that it totally works, but I think that was way too on the nose for me, that part at the end. I also did like, if we're talking about the host thing, I did like that a mention was given about some of the things in the colony had apparently emerged out of genetic engineered pigs. And one character says, they've got some hog in them. I would have liked to have seen some of that, but I think that was a nice little nod to those Alien 3 type, characteristics of the host.
Yeah, I was very disappointed
hogs.
We didn't see a pig alien at any point. It's like they set that up and then didn't do it. That was disappointing.
Well, that was a mention that you quite liked, wasn't it, Rich Top?
Yeah, and we talked about that with Gabriel as well. And as for him, it was just kind of a nod to Alien 3, in a sense. Isn't that what he said? Or was he just trying to further portray the notion that they take on characteristics of their hosts and having that add to this question, I guess.
Yes, I'm emphasizing the DNA reflex stuff. But I completely agree with you. I think it was a nice mention, but it would have been cool to see them, because I always get a little bit of a kick out of seeing multiple variants of the alien together in the same frame, same panel, whatever.
Yeah, we talked about this when we were doing a recent Let's Play of Aliens versus Predator Requiem for the PSP. There's a scene where you go into this barn and you see all these chest-bursted livestock, and we're just like, well, we're the aliens. Like, that'd probably look pretty cool, but a lot of times it seems like those opportunities aren't really explored enough.
Completely agree. But going to the inherited mother's nature, I find myself agreeing a bit with Xenomorphin in the I found, particularly in my original read through, I found that moment when it jumped the Queen was when I was like, yeah, it is deliberately defending him. But Gabriel said he didn't intend for a definitive answer. When I went back and read it, you can sort of explain those other moments away as not being quite intentional defense. Perhaps Mom, as I like to call her in the end, she was going for the larger target, because let's be honest, in theory, especially with the, animal kingdom, the bigger thing is perceived as the, the bigger threat. And then you deliberately see it attack Maxon as well. So it's like, yeah, it's not defending him.
And the problem with that is to me, it was compounded because not only do you lose that ambiguity, but because you go from the alien attacking the boy, and I know some people, I did originally, I thought it was another alien attacking him because the alien that attacks him has both arms. Apparently that was a mistake, I think, in the art. The problem is that it compounds it because there's no way to reconcile those behaviors. It doesn't make the behavior look consistently ambiguous. It makes it look schizophrenic because it's too much of a contradiction. And like he himself said, I think in that interview, there isn't any way to reconcile them. So I think ambiguity is great, but when it makes something look like it's acting schizophrenic, it's it comes across like it's defeating the purpose of even examining that.
Let me put this open question to everybody then, as a way to explain perhaps the behaviour. How much leeway are you going to give, that we don't fully understand the aliens? Perhaps it was challenging the Queen as such. I think somebody, was it Rich Top, mentioned earlier, the possibility that Mom was going to be molting or whatever. How much leeway are you guys willing to give that particular aspect in terms of that we just don't know enough, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where I stand. We don't know enough. We had kind of debated, Eric, before the podcast that I think maybe Mother, quote unquote, alien, could have been molting and challenging the Queen for dominance, or maybe the Queen was planning to kill those two, and the Mother instead wanted to have the boy impregnated. It's like, does this alien want the kid to like join her in the next life or something weird like that? Like, it's just an interesting question for me. I even though yes, the alien attacks the Queen, they're still aliens. Like, we just don't definitively know what was going on there. So I think it's an interesting question. And even if like there was some sort of emotional bond that was passed on to the alien, I think that doesn't make me necessarily groan, That's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And this is what the writer was going for. It's not like, oh, this ruins the continuity. It's like, no, this is a comic that was asking this question. And I think it's an interesting question.
But then why not have the courage of because as I said, this felt too on the nose. If it was something like it got between the boy and the adult aliens were the threat to him. The Queen's just sitting there on her throne laying eggs. She's not actually a threat. If you're going to have it that much of there's no other way to interpret it. It is attacking the Queen. If it would have been something like, as I said, it got between the boy and the other adults and it hissed at them, that's ambiguity. But once you go to the point where it's attacking the Queen, have the courage of your convictions and go with it attacking her. Go with it having
we
the
don't know
emotional
why.
bond.
We don't know why it's attacking.
If anything, I think that lends more to Ridgetop's idea of, perhaps it was just challenging the Queen.
But it was younger than all the other. I mean, if you're going to have one that's challenging the Queen, is ready to molt. That thing was only a few hours. It was younger than the one on the Nostromo. If you're going to have one that's going to do that, it's going to be one of the others that's older, that's in the hive. To me, if you're going to do that, do that. But it was just like, I think he wanted to do a moment where it was like Ripley and the Power Loader, get away from her, you bitch, like a fist pump moment. But it just didn't work for me at all. I mean, you guys bought it, but to me, I can't buy it. To me, that is the writer going, it's protecting the boy, it's killing the Queen, it's not even killing the proper threats, but it's trying to make it a big spectacular moment, and it just did not work for me. I would have loved it if it was more ambiguous, because that's the power in the story, when it is ambiguous. And when it does something like this, which was a big statement, that's when it fell apart for me.
I don't know if it was trying to kill the Queen. It could have just been going like, hey, stop, in a violent way.
Having a ride.
Yeah, and that gets back to something I brought up earlier. I mean, it's kind of cut short because the ship is there. He gets on and he leaves. But if it hadn't, been there, we don't know how that whole scenario would have played out. So I think that, like you were saying, I think
it's going to play out. Either it's going to kill the Queen, or the Queen and the rest are going to fall upon it. There's no way of coming out of that situation where everybody's happy.
I don't necessarily know that it would have fought the Queen to the death. I don't.
Well, it's like there's only the Queen isn't going to go, okay, you're fine, and they're just going to part company. What one of them is going to come to grief. There's not another option.
Well, we've seen in some of the movies like Alien Resurrection where the two aliens attack another, and I know a lot of fans have a problem with that scene. Also in AVPR, just where
that film's one of greatest moments. I mean, the sound effects might be a little off for that moment, but
yeah. Also, even Chet with AVPR, where it just the aliens kind of creeping on the homeless person there, and Chet whacks the alien out of the way. Like, you see that they can be violent with each other sometimes for reasons that are, various.
That's true, exactly. The Queen could have just swatted the other alien aside and put it in its place. We don't know.
But ultimately, and I suppose this is always going to be the downside of the expanded universe, is that they can't, well, the Cold Forge aside, since that is quite definitive, they can't always be definitive with what they are playing with. They are, what ifs kind of thing.
Bound by license.
bound by not fucking up the film, messing with the films too much, I think is more in terms of it, I guess. Yeah, I can't quite decide if I like it or not. I think it's certainly an interesting question, and I actually wanted to ask you about this, Ultramorph. It didn't feel, what's the phrase, the baseball phrase, out of left field.
No, it didn't, because they had been setting it up, throughout the series earlier, that moment where it, kind of lunges at him and it's ambiguous. So yeah, I mean, it didn't feel like this is something that just came at us in the last issue. I mean, I somewhat expected something to happen.
I mean, more that being the particular aspect of this series. So, Xenomorphin mentioned that it was a theory, that Kane inherited an attraction or whatever from, not Kane, sorry, Big Chap inherited an attraction from Kane. That's something I've known about. That's something Xenomorphin's known about. I assume Ridgetop know about it too. But it's not something that gets talked about a lot these days. So, were you aware of that theory going into this series, or was it like that's new kind of thing for you?
I was not aware of that particular theory with Big Chap. No.
So did it feel weird in that regards? Was it what the fuck's this, or was it that actually makes a bit of sense kind of thing?
No, it didn't feel out of left field, because I mean we've seen the DNA reflex in other series. Usually it's just played out physically. The aliens look a little different, or they walk on all fours or something like that. So the idea of an inherited sort of memories and behavior. That didn't ring too far out of left field for me. No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was curious about that. So there was a particular panel that Xenomorphin mentioned earlier, which was actually one of my favourite panels. Was when an alien came across Mother and Maxon in the first issue and sort of looks at him, turns away, and walks off. I love that panel. I really do. I think the whole it coming out of the darkness thing's really cool. The question or the alternative sort of idea I had for this series coming off that particular panel was, would it have been more palatable if perhaps Maxon had been infected? We as the readers were not aware, and what was instead happening was Mom was defending a host. Would that have been more palatable?
I think given the fact that he was probably, if he was infected, he would have been infected around the same time as his mother.
Unless he just was a queen, of course.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe, if he was implanted with a queen, then maybe the alien, was defending the new queen. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting question. I always took it as it was just the alien at the beginning didn't attack because his mother was impregnated.
No, I just mean more in lieu of this whole inherited mother's love kind of thing.
I don't know. I just like how it was presented personally. I don't have too much of a problem with it. But yeah, that could have been an interesting other take for sure.
Okay, maybe that's more a question for Xenomorphin then. Would that have made it more acceptable to you?
Yeah, because you get the absolute logical consistency. It's totally in line with the films. I will say artistically, I love those few panels as well. It's just that when I came to reread it a second time, I was going, wait a minute, why didn't it abduct the kid? Because the kid's not infected. I think that would have actually been made for a gruesome, nice little twist in the tale, actually, if we'd have seen a hint that he was perhaps infected with a queen right at the end. I would have actually quite liked that. Yeah, I think that would have worked nicely, yeah.
So another question off that panel is, did it bother anybody that the alien didn't take the mother and just hive her up so she couldn't be running around? Or do you think they are consciously letting the infected host spread around and, pop elsewhere?
Well, blame Alien 3 for that, because that's already set the precedent.
That's a problem I have with Alien 3, actually.
Yeah, I'd go with that, but it's already done at that point.
This kind of goes to one of the topics I wanted to bring up next, was that one of the things I really liked about this comic was the size of the colony seemed like a very established, almost like a full city, rather than a small colony like Hadley's Hope. So this was from the beginning, it's very chaotic, like with them driving out of their apartment complex. Like you just see this is a massive city colony. And it was just one of the good moments of this comic. And there's a few of them where it kind of speaks to a wider narrative that we don't see that I would have liked to see. Like there's another moment where the ship that they were trying to rendezvous with, the USS Carver, falls out of the sky, like Aliens Colonial Marine style, which apparently that ship was infected as well. And so I'm like, oh, well, what was the story of the survivors that got on that ship in the outbreak there? So for me, seeing an outbreak in a colony of that scale is kind of like akin to that sequel of 28 Days Later, the 28 Weeks Later, which I really like that movie almost as much as the first one, of just like having this city go to hell very quickly. And as a Resident Evil fan as well, like I really like seeing that happen in this intense survival situation. So yeah, I did think that the comic just had really strong moments. And if it was kind of going back to the initial point here, if it was this massive outbreak, I don't think there's any way the aliens could have, hived everyone up completely and kept track of all these people trying to escape. Obviously, they'd just be killing or implanting people, but who knows how much time they would actually spend bringing people back to the hive.
Okay, well, let's go on to your topic of discussion there in terms of the setting, in terms of the big colony. Was that something else that anybody picked up on? Was that a particular point that other people really liked?
Yeah, I like that as well. I like there's a couple. You mentioned the carver, but there's also the scene later on where they're trying to get to the escape ship, and they're like, "Oh, the bridge is out. Oh, the engineers must have blown the bridge when they tried to get away." And somebody even says, "Wait, you're the administrator of the colony. How do you not know they did that?" And I definitely liked it in this story. There's a lot of things that are implied to have happened that we don't necessarily see. It's definitely an aspect of the story that I liked.
I actually quite liked a lot of the sort of design around the extra world in this series. One of the issues I have with the older series is particularly the first one, actually, particularly series 1, is that stuff that's not from the films that's trying to expand the world doesn't always look like it fits the alien world, and I do think book 1's a fucker for that. But a lot of the things I liked in this one was the expanded stuff. It felt like it slotted right into Alien. The design of the car, that had shades of the angles of the APC and things as little. It sounds silly, but it's such a little thing, but it made such a big difference to me. The way the comic opened with Maxon's room, and just like the angle of the support struts around his bed, they looked like they'd been ripped from the same space IKEA that everybody visited for, the Nostromo and Sevastopol, and the computer and the spaceport and stuff like that. It's so small, but it makes such a big deal in terms of making it feel like a part of this wider world. I really liked that.
Yeah, to me, you mentioning that, to me, it's the art style. I did notice he's better at doing technical details on hardware, slightly better than he is with drawing human figures. But it totally slotted in with the architectural style somewhere between Hadley's Hope and Sevastopol. And the fact that they did start it amidst the infection, it's not like an origin story Val and Nest got there. I think that was there's pros and cons with that, because on one hand I like that because you don't have all the exposition. You already know what's going to happen. It's a Hadley's Hope writ large scenario. On the other hand, it did mean we were, because like in Aliens, we're already invested in Ripley's story by the time we get to Hadley's Hope. And then we have the other characters. With this, it's a straight A to Z survival situation. So it meant that they're always on the clock, and we didn't really get a chance to get invested in any of the characters except for the kid. And that's mostly because it's A, from his perspective, and B, there's this mystery about the alien's behavior in regards to him. So there's pros and cons. But in terms of art style, I will say I really liked the art style. And it was also really nice to see a return of the Cameron Stan Winston ridge-headed design, which will forever remain my favorite head design. But yeah, the architecture, the vehicles, I know what you mean. It completely felt like part of the Alien cinematic continuity, because we've all seen especially some of the older comics, where some of the art style, it's not bad, it's science fiction, but it doesn't feel like it belongs in the same continuity. And this This I could have totally bought as like storyboards to an Alien film in terms of what the set design and the vehicles, and they even had like it wasn't a drop ship, but it was a shuttle, but it believably looked like it was like from the same manufacturers who'd made the drop ship and who'd made the Sulaco. It looked like it existed within that same continuity reference. So yeah, it really looked like a mixture of the Sevastopol and Hadley's Hope, and that really helped to bring that the sense of atmosphere through, I felt.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that too. That drop ship from the end of issue 1 and the beginning of issue 2. Exactly, that's one of my favorite little details, like the civilian model escape ship. Exactly, it looks like it fits perfectly in the universe. It's like an updated sort of civilian model design. That was a really nice, just little thing that I appreciated.
I like that little moment where it kind of comes through the clouds out of the storm. Kind of a weird reference here, but it reminded me of the Matrix Revolutions, if you guys remember that.
That's what it reminded me of, yeah, totally.
Well, what was interesting about that panel as well was, you also had a spire from one of the colony buildings, so, that goes to implying the scale of the world and the scale of the infestation that's taking place. So that's nice, just small, understated world building.
Carrying on from that, one of the subplots is that they keep saying that the terraforming didn't take, but I did find that at odds with the fact that this is way bigger than Hadley's Hope. This looks at least one, if not several cities large. And I just, as a reader, I loved the scale of all this stuff. It felt very much like back in the days of Book 2 sort of thing. But I was thinking to myself, if the terraforming didn't take, how did it get to that scale in the first place?
Well, I guess that's going to depend on what your aim with terraforming is. I mean, obviously it was a breathable planet. It just wasn't what you'd call paradise. So, was it intended to be a lush green Earth-like place that was, going to be aliens' riser? Or, was it like Hadley's Hope where they just wanted breathable air? I'd assume they'd want more from it with, the it didn't take statements, because perhaps there was just more to the process that this particular colony didn't quite do. It's a fair point, but I don't think it's necessarily a big problem.
No, it's not. It's just, it felt a little at odds, because I would have thought myself, well, even if you're talking about like wanting to get farmland or something, you'd have thought that they would have figured that out by the time it gets to at least, the size of a town like Hadley's Hope. They would have figured that out before it grew so huge. That it wasn't massive. It just did make me feel, there's more to tell here.
Oh, and on the topic of the spaceship design as well, this is one it gets over William Gibson's Alien 3 for me, because it did do something different. I have a problem with that series in that everybody seems to use dropships as interstellar craft, as shuttles.
Yes.
It was cool seeing them do something different with this. But you mentioned the artwork. Let's talk the artwork then. So, Ultramorph, what was your take on the visual style of this? Is it something that was it a strength of this series?
It was, like I said earlier. I mean, he draws a mean alien, especially like we were talking about. We've talked about it just in context of behavior question, but I mean, I personally just enjoy the panel where the other alien is attacking the queen. He does a good job both with the aliens and, like we've been talking about, the ship design. I like that this series, the artwork is sort of as dark and dirty as it is. It really gives you a feel of what's going on, especially in the early issues where they're dealing with that sandstorm or that storm.
That looked great. The sandstorm looked great, especially with the moments where the aliens are merging sort of out of the, the haze of the storm.
Exactly. So, I mean, I definitely liked this. I enjoyed especially the sequence where they were sort of crawling across the cable, the bridge that was out, the little bit at the end of issue 3 where he falls into the water. The artwork in this was very strong. So yeah, definitely no complaints on that end from me.
Rich Top, how about you?
So I really like the art of Gabriel Hardman, who also wrote it, which we saw that last with Dead Orbit as well.
Don't forget Rain Burrito as well, though. You always. I mean, I
was about to bring him up. So he did the coloring, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The color work. And Gabriel did the line art. Yeah, the colorists have it rough in the comic industry. They don't get as much recognition, I think, as the line artist, unfortunately.
Well, with me, it means the line artist always gets the blame in the past. But no, I'm only really recently, over the last few years, realizing just how important the colorists are.
True, and like we've always talked about when we've clamored for the AvP recoloration that we got a tease of with that special edition, like the coloring can just make it feel like an entirely new comic. So yes, Rain Burrito did the colors for that, and they are good. I hope it happens,
they
but no, it probably
good.
won't. They are good.
He seems to be Dark
colors are
Horse's.
good.
He seems to be Dark Horse's resident colorist for the Alien books, because he did all of Life and Death.
I thought it was Dan Jackson that was sort of like the main. Well, no, I guess he's working most with Brian Wood's series at the minute.
Correct, yeah. And Rain Barreto did, I believe, all of Life and Death as well. So yeah, he's done quite a bit for them.
You know, I'm just going to check actually, just so we've got accurate information. So yeah, he did Predator.
Which one?
He did Prometheus, Life and Death. This is.
Oh.
Rain Burrito. Sorry, he did Aliens. I'm going to assume, yes, he did everything. We're on AvP now. I might as well actually get the information. He did AvP, and he did Final Conflict. So yeah, Rain Burrito did all of Life and Death. But did he do Fire and Stone?
No, that was different. Totally different colors, I think, on everything.
Even that's impressive with all the different line art styles for Life and Death that he did the colors for all that.
Brian Thies ended up doing most of Life and Death as well, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it was it only Aliens that had a different artist?
Prometheus had a different artist too.
Right, no, Prometheus was second. Yes, no, you're right. I think Brian Thies did all of them apart from Prometheus.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess the art had a bit more variation in the original Fire and Stone.
Anyway, sorry, you were saying the art for Dust to Dust.
So yeah, I like it. Again, I think one of the things I look for in an Aliens comic with line art especially is how dynamic are the aliens? You know, do they look like they're just frozen in a pose, or do they look like they're actually moving and actually in action? And I think he portrayed that really well. You get the sense that they're being chased by the xenomorphs, and definitely a style of the second film, just your typical kind of Cameron alien style, which is good. And again, that's portrayed really well here also. One of the things I always like, though, is the style of, I know we always bring up this comic, Aaron, but the Destroying Angels, it's like a biomechanical ADI alien in the Destroying Angels. And I really like that too, when they kind of do a more original take on the xenomorph design rather than, oh, here's the alien exactly as it looked in Aliens or Aliens Colonial Marines or Alien Isolation. You know, I don't like being able to recognize where that alien is referenced from.
You ruined the Fire and Stone for me. With
I did. I'm sorry.
Thing.
Those mecha action figures.
Yep. And you know, that's just how some artists work. And some people, I would think most people wouldn't even pick up on that. But for hardcore fans like us, we definitely do. And what I personally would really like to see is like more original design variations from artists. You know, still have it recognizably be an alien, but take it in your own direction a little bit. So I do think the aliens, though, like I said, in their movements, they're drawn really well. And kind of going to what I was talking about in original looking Aliens, what do you guys think of the variant covers with the highly stylized looks about them?
Not a fan.
I really like them. See,
I've struggled with a lot of the variant artwork lately, actually. Like the stuff for Rescue that's been coming out, their variants I don't like. But that's just me. What
about you guys? Have you looked at them?
Yeah, as far as the variants, I'm looking at my physicals right now. I bought the variants for the first and the fourth issue. I actually really like them. I mean, they're definitely they're very stylized, but I like the bright sort of purples and blues on them. I think they're cool. I mean, I honestly wouldn't even mind seeing a comic with interior like that, something a little more stylized. But I think the variants are pretty cool here.
And the variant cover artist is Carlos Dienda. Sorry if that pronunciation's wrong, but just to throw that out there.
Well, we never actually really talk about the covers in these review episodes, which is a little unfair actually, I think, but it's just something that always slips in my mind. But I really love again, it's It's Gabriel doing the standard covers for this.
Yep.
I love all of them. I think all of them are really nice, particularly issue 1's cover, which I think is being used for the trade as well.
1 and 3 are the strongest, I believe. Yeah, as far as the regular covers go.
See, I think I prefer 1 and 4, actually. 4's the one where they're sort of chasing him up the structure.
Yeah.
And I think you don't... A problem with covers in general is they don't generally represent the quality of the artwork inside them. What is great about this one is that, yes, it does. It is Gabriel, and I think it's Rain as well, doing the colourway. So these covers, they are representative of what's inside, and I love it because I do love the artwork in this. I love the colour palette that takes place, and I love a lot of the texture of the darks. When you think Alien, you do think blacks, you think blues, you think greys, you think dark colour palettes. But I loved a lot of what happened with this was, like the sandstorm, it had texture to it, the shadows, it had texture to it. And even like the frames of half the humans being in colour, it wasn't flat black. And I really liked that. I thought it really gave a lot of the artwork depth. Really, really loved Rain and Gabriel's team up on this. It was such a huge strength for this series, and I do really appreciate the quality of a lot of the artwork at the minute. That we said the narrative of this was simple. We said the same of Dead Orbit as well, and I find a lot of the artist's strength is really helping support these simple narratives and making it stand up. And that's great because comic is such a visual format. Again, I have such a problem with a lot of the older comics, is because while the stories, whether they're simple, whether they're trying to be complicated, whether they're just playing with this particular aspect of the lore, if they look shit, then that's half a comic's appeal down the pan. So yeah, I'm really loving seeing the strength of the artwork at the minute in these series. It's great.
Going back to what Ridgestop said about that, I definitely agree. We had this particular art style really captured this dynamic inertia of movement from the aliens, which I suspect can be difficult for artists, because I suspect a lot of artists are used to depicting human movement, whereas the alien would move in a more, like if you see a tarantula rushing across the floor, that kind of a movement. It's more of a blurring type thing. And I agree about the colour palette. It was a great environmental colour palette. But I would also like to give praise to some of the shots, like we mentioned earlier, where the alien's just looming out of the darkness, or it's just rising up slowly. Things like that were conveyed really well, just as much as when we had it's one of the few stories where we see a chest burster attacking people as well. But there was, the chest burster, the face huggers, they're all really well drawn. And there was one scene where they're trying to get to an escape shuttle in this facility, and we see this. I could be wrong, but it looked like tons of aliens just sort of like linking up to one another. And it looked like how you see army ants, where you see where you see army ants where they make what's called a bivouac, which is basically they make a nest out of their own bodies, and that looked beautiful. And there were also these parts where the boy is cut. Now, this is the other point I felt was a bit of a wasted opportunity. Not because of the art style, because the art style was great, but I noticed that you had Max, and he was, before he gets to the Queen's chamber, he comes across this part where he has to get to, he's trying to get to this escape shuttle. But between him and the escape shuttle, there are these beautifully drawn eggs, and I thought, oh great, they're unopened eggs. You got to have this. How are the characters going to negotiate getting between there and there with all these eggs? And they just went past them, and I was expecting one of them to open up, because I think that would have played on, because the boy clearly is going to have some face hugger related trauma, because he saw it on his mother's face, and that's what led to the one that's stalking him. And I think that would have been really neat to play around with, because it would have played into the themes that had already come by him versus at least one, if not more, of these face huggers, or trying to get around them, done something with that, because I thought that was ripe for coming up with an inventive solution. You know, he had the synthetics head, which we're probably going to come to next, but he just wandered past them. And I thought that was a missed opportunity, particularly with how well this artist had been able to realize the texture of the eggs, the texture of this beautifully realized hive nest material along the walls. It's some of the best alien nest realization I've seen since the days of, I don't know, Dennis Bouvet, John Bolton, because they did nest material really beautifully. Yeah, I just thought that was a shame they didn't do something with the eggs, considering they were so beautifully done. So, but the art style is definitely a high point throughout the whole of, no matter whether you have issues with some of the story, just the art style in general. I'm definitely a fan of this. It worked beautifully, and it really helped to immerse you in the not just environmental, but as we were saying earlier, the chaos of what's happening. I mean, it starts out with Max just looking out of a window and a guy shooting. You don't know what he's shooting at, but then he shoots straight through the glass at the kid. He's picking out bits of glass from his skin. All that works so well, because you got this sense of like actual movement from it, and it was rushing through past his skin almost. You just felt that. So yeah, I really like not just the dynamism of the movement he was able to capture, but just those moments where it's just things are just still. But you, like with the aliens all linking up, or the eggs, but they're just things where you need to spend those extra few moments just taking in this grotesque beauty that the artist has managed to convey. And for a comic, as you say, that's at least half, if not more, of the enjoyment factor.
Aaron, I think you're right in you mentioning that. Yeah, when the art is lacking, or if it doesn't match up to the covers, then it can prevent like full enjoyment of the comic. I think Inhuman Condition is probably the biggest example of that for you, right? And for me, like maybe even Earth War.
I give Inhuman Condition such a pass just because of how much I think once you hit that story's twist, how much that artwork actually supports it. Like a retroactive.
I still haven't read that one. That's one of the ones I still haven't read.
I haven't read it either.
It's a weird one for me because I hate Sam Keith. I do. His professional examples of aliens.
I hate him.
I'm sure he's a little
an irrational vendetta.
Well, no, let's be honest. Earth War was what his original title was. Female War.
Yeah.
Looks dog. And how much of that is the colourist? How much of that is Sam? I don't know, but
it's very Barbarella-like.
Yeah, compared to book one and Nightmare Asylum especially, I still think Nightmare Asylum has some of the best art in any Aliens comic
100%
ever.
Yeah, you go from some of the best to some of the most questionable pretty quick from book 2 to book 3.
The problem is that Sam Keith's artwork, it's not necessarily bad on its own, but it's because it's so heavily stylized that at points some of the, not just the characters, but the costumes, they almost feel like a caricature, which is why I said a few moments ago. It felt very, if you watch Barbarella, that old 1960s science fiction, if he did an adaptation of that, he would be perfect for Barbarella. But when you come from Dennis Bouvet and they did something which it was so atmospheric, it matched the Alien and Aliens in the cinematic color palette, the stylization. It felt so photorealistic.
It was just Aliens.
And you went
comic.
immediately, but you it was so photorealistic. And then you went from something that's so heavily stylized. And we've had a recent example of this where some of the concept art from Blomkamp's Alien 5 project released again. And you had like a mutated alien that was like part centipede or something. It might have been a mutation. It might have come out of an unusual host. We don't know. But a lot of people in the comments section, they were saying, oh, it's too much, this, that, and the other. And I was thinking to myself, you're saying that at least half because the artist who drew it, it's so heavily stylized. Where if you'd have had someone like John Bolton or something do the same concept, but in their style, I think people have gone, oh, that looks scary. Sam Keith, because you went from the artwork of book 1 and 2, into Sam Keith, and he has his strengths, but it's because the contrast was so jarring. That's what hurt it. And there are other artists who, they're not so great, but I think if you went from one of them...
Another highly stylized one as well.
Yeah, if you went one of those to Sam Keith, the contrast wouldn't have hurt it, but it was that contrast. That's what hurt it.
I do recommend giving Inhuman a Condition a go. It is an unusual one.
I've been meaning to read it. I have it on my shelf. I just need to read it.
Give it a go. It's a novella, so, it shouldn't take you too long. Read that tonight after we're done here.
Okay. Well, I'll read it on the plane when I go to LA tomorrow. But
we'll mention that at the end of this, actually.
But Eric, you mentioned that really cool chestburster scene right after the dropship crashes, which was also a cool scene, like where the big airbags come out and it just rolls down this hill like that.
Oh yeah, I like that
any
idea.
basis
Yeah.
in reality, is anything doing?
Yes.
When there's like the Mars landers, they have the airbags that pop out. Yeah.
It's just to help with entry on the planet. So I saw that. I did think that there's the problem if it goes against jagged rocks, and it actually happened in this. So I like
it popped it, yeah. But like you were saying about that chestburster scene, it also kind of goes back to the mother defending the son question, because we see the chestburster scurrying away, and then the kid has a gun, and one of the other passengers grabs the gun from the kid forcefully, and that's when the chestburster comes out and kills that person who took the gun. I hadn't really considered that one
as a moment of that. Yeah, that's a cool point. And it was really cool actually seeing the chestbursters be aggressive. I like that. There was a lot of small moments in this, like the acid, having an effect. The acid was the reason that the car crashed. The acid was the reason that the ship, one of the reasons that the ship was damaged as well. So it's just little moments like that I really like to see get a bit of a highlight.
Well, it's something about the alien which is its own inbuilt plot device. It was literally one in the first film where it was there because O'Bannon and co, they thought an indestructible alien would be too ridiculous, so they had to give the characters a reason to not just shoot it. And it's nice to see when a writer takes advantage of the natural things about the alien. I'd still like to see a writer in a future comic take advantage of the comment we had from Ash about it's replacing it with silicon cells. That's something to do with the fact it is at least in part a silicon-based life form. What could you do with that as a plot device? I don't know. But you have acid, and so many stories just have, like with the games, they take account that it's going to shoot acid all over the place when it's hit, but they don't use it to further the story. And in this, it furthered the story. It had the car crash. It had the ship not being able to leave orbit, which in turn furthered the story. It's nice to see when someone uses that to move the story along, as opposed to just having, just an individual little action piece, and then it doesn't contribute to the story. So I really like the fact that acid is coming back. Make acid great again.
Well, that's something I always think of this in terms of, when we're thinking of suggestions for other things. So, like, if they were to do a new Alien game, something I would love to see, especially in the Battlefield days, is the acid able to actually interact with the environment. There's a locked door that you can't get through. Trigger an alien to come and show up and try and, create it.
Yeah.
Or I think Out of the Shadows did this, but it's been a while since I read/listened to it. But have the alien actually bleed on a ship and cause an issue, cause decompression, cause a blockage that they've got to get around. Something like that I would love to see them injure an alien, acid cause a breach, and some could just get sucked out of the hole. Give it a bit more presence.
A newborn.
Yeah, give it a bit more presence. But so it's such a small thing in the big picture, but I just appreciate seeing it used so much.
Hey, maybe you haven't been keeping up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked, pal.
Let's talk characters. So, I'll pass it off to Ultramorph to start us off on this one. What did you think of Dust to Dust characters, of Maxim, of Sinita, of Nameless Captain?
I thought the characters, they were, I'll be honest, I don't think they were the strongest part of the story. I liked Maxim. I wish they would have done a little bit more. Obviously, they were playing up the emotional trauma happening to this child, losing his mother. We get a little bit at the end when he has the nightmare. I think that was a good sort of note to end the story on with his art.
Very alien callback as well. What
exactly.
aliens?
That was very good. I wish we'd gotten, I forget who brought it up earlier in the podcast, that the story is supposed to be from his perspective, but in a lot of ways really isn't. It's more
that's
sort of explaining the story around him. So I think there was kind of a missed opportunity there. And the only other character that I really felt was noteworthy, obviously the colony administrator. He was interesting. I didn't really know how to read him. I think the twist that he was a synthetic, like most of them are, was telegraphed fairly obviously.
See, I didn't see that one coming.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
you didn't?
No, I mean...
I saw it in hindsight.
Yeah, in hindsight, the hints were there, but as I was reading through, I wasn't thinking, oh, this guy's going to be a synthetic, oh, this guy's going to be a synthetic.
Okay, what about that bit of because it was obvious the moment I saw this bit of dialogue where
we know
who you are and what you are. And whenever it's in an alien story, you know it means they're going to be synthetic, unless they're going to canonize Arcturians or something. But
I thought they were just calling him
going to be synthetic.
I thought they were just calling him corporate scum.
Yeah, me
pretty
too.
much
Me
at that
too.
point.
It was because it was like in bold. That what was in bold, so you knew it was a plot point.
Well, like Ridgestop said, in hindsight, yes, it's quite obvious. But no, as I was reading it through the first time, I didn't see it coming at all.
I tell you what, with that bit of dialogue, I was actually hoping, it's going to be a red herring. It's that he's not a synthetic, but it was going to be, and I don't know what, but it was them leading you to assume he's a synthetic, and then bam, it turned out to be something else. And I was hoping that's what would play, but ultimately, as was said, it was telegraphed. That bit of dialogue, the moment I read that, I thought, he's really? Is he going to be a synthetic? We always have a synth. Can it be something? But no, it's a synthetic. So yeah, I agree. That was. I think if they'd removed that bit of dialogue and we actually had the reveal of him being a synthetic when, Max realizes that would have been interesting, although I don't think him being a synthetic necessarily added much to the story, unfortunately.
Ultramuff, did that play off properly for you? And going off the last point that Xenomorphin just made as well, did it make a difference to the story?
No, I don't think him being a synthetic really added anything. I think actually, had he not been a synthetic, it may have been slightly more compelling, given that his whole reason for why they allowed this to even happen on the colony was just the pragmatic decision, well, the colony has failed, we need to get some income, we need to make some money. That might have actually played better, as a flawed character if he'd been human. So I think being a synthetic and making that kind of decision, of course a synthetic would make a decision like that. It's very calculated, but if he'd been a real person, I think that would have been more interesting.
Although it must be said that panel where Maxim just, again, showing up sort of out of the darkness around him, holding the fucker's head, was phenomenal. I think that whole thing was worth it just for that one moment alone.
Yeah, the headless android kind of gave me a bit of David vibes a little bit.
It didn't to me. I just thought, okay, he's holding his head. It didn't make much.
Well, just because that was the only time we had ever seen that,
That'll give me destroying angel vibes too. They did that there also. There's something with synthetics in their heads. I don't know what it is.
Because of Ash. I think someone would listen to this would probably say, you needed him to be a synthetic so he can haul his head around, but you could have had the same effect if someone was trapped in a control room, like the recent Alien Isolation game, and Max would have needed to communicate with them via walkie-talkie or a wristwatch or so. You could have had the same effect. That's why I say it didn't add anything to the story. Well, you needed his, I think the iris detector on the door or something needed him, but I mean, that wasn't necessary either. So yeah, I could have done it without him being a synthetic.
Yeah, you were right. As far as the Ash head talking, I should have been more specific because we had seen that. But I just mean like carrying the head around. The head is talking with the protagonist while they're going with them, and transporting the head is more along the lines of what I meant by the David vibes.
Any other thoughts on the characters, Ultramorph, or were the rest just sort of there?
Yeah, they were just sort of there for me. I figured it was a 2-character story as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, there's Sunita, the woman he goes back for, but yeah, they didn't do much for me outside of Maxim and the administrator.
I did like that scene though, where he goes back for her, but it did make me wonder, like, how is this boy able to pilot this thing? I know that the android makes a comment like, oh, it's meant to be mostly automated, but still he's controlling the stick. And it's like, okay, well, how automated is it really if he can just turn straight around after blasting off pretty much to pick her up? But I thought she was a good character. You know, you could tell that she cared for the boy, but there just wasn't enough development with the other characters, which maybe there wasn't meant to be. Like, we were focused on this intense survival situation with this kid. And even in the end, like, you see he gets adopted after they get rescued on this space station or other spacecraft. And he wakes up from a nightmare. And that's another thing. Like, if we would have seen Blomkamp's alien version pan out, did the nightmares ever really go away? Like they mentioned at the end of Alien, is it really safe to dream? Because, like, that's a seriously traumatic event, like losing your family and everyone you've ever known in this colony just being killed in the worst ways imaginable. So I did like the ending a little bit, because it's like, shit, this kid's gonna have to deal with this now. But at the same time, it makes you think, like, wouldn't word of this get out, like a colony this big and this large of an outbreak happening there? Yeah. Like, how does this not get out? Like, I don't know the state of the universe in this particular comic, but
that's the problem with the canon, because of that line in Alien Resurrection. That's why I can't, on something of if it was a little town like Hadley's Hope, I could have but not only is there a massive colony, but you have survivors, and I think that's way more difficult to reconcile with the resurrection. Like, especially also there's I don't know how big it was, but the USS Carver, that went down as well. I don't know if you guys realised the little in-joke about the captain's name, Captain Prego.
How did you figure that as a joke?
Well, impregnation, and you're assuming there was an infestation aboard that ship. I thought that a little bit when I heard it. But it's difficult to explain how something on this scale would be covered up. I can't reconcile that with canon now.
I know you don't agree with me on this one, and I can't remember whether we actually spoke with it on a podcast or whether it was just on Facebook chat. But
I think it was Facebook.
It's just this whole... You know, people do say, you know, like you're saying, you know, how can something this big not be picked up on? But we don't truly know the scale of mankind in this point. That might be a blip in the grand population, with how many colonies there are, what the communication infrastructure's like, what the news reporting.
But we're not talking. It's one thing to say they covered it up from the public. I could totally buy that. But when you're trying to reconcile it with Perez, it's the future, the government knowing there's a military ship that went down. There's going to be an investigation, man. And I assume that ship was in communication with home bases and all the rest of it. They knew what the situation was.
But
that's my problem.
Military as well. At the end of the day,
yeah, but all the files would have been. All I'm saying is it's not impossible. But when you have something of this scale, and then you immediately watch Alien Resurrection with that line, because it's not covering up from the public. It's what United Systems military, which I assume is the unified Earth military. There's only one, I assume. I mean, they could retcon that to mean just one faction. It's possible. But they're meant to have access to everything that went on with the alien, and especially with that military ship that went down. They should have known something. It should have been something to not justify that. The last encounter we had was, Ellen Ripley, to all intents and purposes, made the alien extinct. That's what sticks in my craw about. And as a story, it's fine. It's just that if someone's going to try and make the argument that no, this story's definitely part of canon, I'm going to go because it's too large in scale.
These days, you just have to ignore Resurrection's line there. I mean, no, you are completely right in that line devastates the
I wish
universe.
It hadn't been in there.
they've also,
Guys, I think
they
we're
also
forgetting
dealt with
about
this.
the big delete.
Yes, I was just about to bring it up. They also dealt with this back in the early 2000s. You know, I say dealt with it. It might not be a satisfactory method of dealing.
Yeah, I
with it,
don't buy that at all.
I don't know.
It is the reason for it as far as the comics are concerned.
Yeah, but that was before the comics themselves rebooted again and again and again. It's getting a bit.
You've always had the expanded universe kind of butting heads with the core films, and I think the problem is the core films, by their nature, are contained, and in some of them, namely Alien 3 and Resurrection and the prequels, in my opinion, have confined the universe in a number of ways. Like it's so funny to me that in Aliens Colonial Marines, which I still have not heard if that's not canon now, because it was before that game came out.
It's not. Have we not been through this?
It's allegedly been revised to not be canon, which is why Fox's opinion of what is and isn't canon, it feels so fluid.
Anyway, regardless of the canon discussion, I find it super funny that Bishop 2 is there, like, no, give me the alien, and then, back to LV-426, where we already have our whole base set up.
Yeah.
We're already studying the aliens.
Well, Clone and Marines is trash, let's be honest.
Yeah. But I mean,
do a playthrough of that one.
I know, but I'm not looking forward to it.
When that line comes up, I wish it hadn't been written. It's like with Alien 3. Alien 3 made it that queens are specialized chest bursters. I wish they hadn't done that, because it means that a normal alien can't become one, because it doesn't make evolutionary sense. But that is what the precedent is already set. So from my perspective, we have to go with the precedent that's been set. So I totally agree that it's really tempting to just say, well, let's ignore it, but I can't ignore it because it's there. I'd like to ignore it, and I like this as a story, but it's just in terms of it's really large scale. I'm not seeing how to reconcile it with that. That's all.
I think you're right. I think the like we were just saying, sometimes the films just don't match up with the expanded universe by their very nature, because the expanded universe, like its name would suggest, is different artists and different creators exploring parts of this universe. And sometimes I feel like the films maybe try a little too hard to make themselves feel super important for the overall story.
Yeah.
And by doing so, they discredit a lot of the expanded universe. It's kind of like we saw with Star Wars Legends and all that, with Disney taking that franchise and just saying, well, everything that happened after Return of the Jedi is pretty much non-canon now. And a lot of fans took issue with that, because there were some really great stories told post Return of the Jedi in that. So yeah, it's just kind of a tension that's there. I think, honestly, the films should be more like the comics. I've made this argument ad nauseum now, especially bringing it back to Blomkamp's Alien again. People say, oh, you want to destroy Alien 3? It's like, no, I mean, I love that movie. Blomkamp has said he respects that movie and he never wanted to get rid of it. But I think the universe is getting to a point where it's, Alien is this idea that just resonates with people. And canon is so convoluted and messy anyway, that we should just have different interpretations. Like we've had different arcs and different reboots with the comic series. I think it should be the same with the films, personally, at this point. But
maybe
I know a lot of fans would disagree with me on that one.
Yeah, maybe the answer is for Dark Horse or whoever just to do a line of EU, which is like, the Elseworld. It's a what if. And they just branch with that, and then you don't have to worry about it touching anything else, because it would be officially its own thing. I mean, maybe that's the solution to it, because man, canon has got so bloated nowadays. It's just so you say it does paint itself into a corner, especially with the cinematic interpretation.
Well, that's the problem. Is franchise is going to franchise, so you can't. Yeah. I mean, unless it's something like Star Trek, where even that the canon is falling apart with that too. Like I can't think of a single series now where the canon is just perfect. Everything fits like correctly. It's like, no, these stories have just gotten so vast that not all the pieces are going to fit together, and you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to go with.
But steering back towards Dust to Dust, I think there was just one sort of final
the topic of the podcast.
Hey, that fit, okay? Because like we were saying,
Yeah, no,
it's
scale
of
relevant,
the
but
outbreak.
it's a discussion in itself, I think.
I agree.
One last thing I would like to just talk about, and yeah, I have touched on it briefly, so it might only be a small thing, was the individualizing of the main alien in this. I love it when they do things to make the aliens distinctive, whether it's grid, whether it's, again, the last one's Dead Orbit kind of sort of ripped this one off with the arm, but it's the twin factor as well. So I really loved seeing Mom lose
the armless alien. Yeah. That was really cool to see that. They, after the dropship crashes, they know Chestburster is still in there and the dropship is damaged beyond repair anyway, so they all evacuate and destroy the dropship with a self-destruct or something like that. But the juvenile alien survives. Its arm was blown off. But you're right, Eric. There was that one mistake panel where it's like coming down the stairs at him, and then suddenly it has two arms again, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
Well, jazz hands does not work without the S, without the plural. Come on, that was a throwback.
That's kind
to
of a
Alien.
big thing, though. That's like what?
I know
like,
that was. I know you tried to do it, and I've seen somebody else try to use it as a justification for it wasn't really Mum. But no, I think that was nothing more than an art mistake.
I did think that initially. I thought it was another xenomorph that popped out of the shadows somewhere and that she was going to save him again.
That could have been interesting in itself, but yeah, it does look like, because the one-armed one's just nowhere to be seen after that moment. So yeah.
Well, no, she comes back to save him from the Queen.
Yeah, it has
but
one arm
not
again
within
after
that. See, it's not like they deal with that alien and that the one-armed one's still standing there, is what I mean.
What about you, Ultramuff? Any thoughts on the individualization stuff?
No, I mean, I agree that I like when we get actual aliens that become characters. Somebody brought up Grid earlier. So yeah, I mean, I definitely thought it was interesting that was clearly just an art mistake in that one panel. But no, I enjoyed the sort of the character of Mom. So yeah, it was cool by me.
Okay, does anybody else have any specific elements they want to bring up about this series?
Just going back to characters again, I felt they were serviceable, but they seemed to mostly be there for exposition rather than feeling like characters in their own right. When I brought up the thing about the story was meant to be from the boys' point of view, I said it didn't really feel, it wasn't conveyed properly enough to me, strongly enough. And somebody else mentioned that, well, you get a lot of the other characters are explaining things around the boy. And I felt it would have benefited, because kids, especially of a very young, like the age that I felt Max is meant to be.
I think it was supposed to be 12 or 13.
Yeah, they tune out when adults are doing that kind of thing. They sort of go, like you see it in Aliens when they're talking about like how we're going to, like our plan of action. And she's just like playing around with a grenade, stuff like that.
She was supposed to be a bit younger though.
Yeah, but kids do that. They either tune out or they find other things more interesting. Or I think it would have conveyed more that it's from Max's point of view if we did have more access to his thoughts, or he would have mentally gone back a bit more to his mother. This thing that's meant to have traumatized him, it kind of comes back, but it doesn't happen as much as you'd expect it to happen for a childhood trauma. I think there needs to be a bit more of that. When the adults are talking, I think he should have mentally drifted back to certain things. Things like that, because otherwise I don't think it gets conveyed. It feels more like the story's revolving around him, but it's not necessarily from his perspective, even though that was the writer's intent. I think that should have been signaled more strongly. We should have got more from Max's point of view. He should have been, maybe he'd have noticed something while the adults are arguing, and you get more of that from his perspective, not just from a third person type of thing. So I think that he would have benefited more from doing that. But yeah, the problem is, as I said earlier, it is a straight A to Z survival thing, and you're already in the midst of it. So you don't really get the chance to connect with individual personalities so much as talking heads who are mentioning this, that, and the other about their immediate situation.
And that's very much sort of the justification for why we're not learning about these characters. And I think it goes towards, what Gabriel was trying to do with the story. You hit the ground running. Maxim is not privy to all the details of what's happening. He is not privy to these characters' backstories, and they are not going to stop in the middle of this thing to tell people their life stories.
No, but you don't get as much of an impact.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I just think it works in terms of what he was aiming for.
What's his name? Roman, I think. He's he's on his last legs or so. That didn't have any resonance with me as a reader. It's meant to be more of a poignant, this is a human being and they're coming to their, but it was just like, they're a red shirt to me. I didn't have much of a reason to care about that happening.
Everybody in this is red shirts, really.
Yeah, and that's the problem. When everyone's a red shirt, it's like
it's got no impact in that sense.
That's the big problem with Alien 3. Everyone's a red shirt. They're carbon copied bald dudes who've done things bad, and you generally don't care about it. Some people literally say, I started rooting for the alien, and they knew that was a bad perspective to have in a film, but they felt so divorced from any emotional resonance that they just thought, well, I'll just treat it like a slasher film, which ultimately was in many ways. And I think that's to the detriment of a story because you do have this group. It's a small group of survivors. They've got like one gun between them, and I think we should have connected more with that. We should have had something there, because otherwise you do have this red shirt problem. So that's why I say the characters are serviceable, but it would have been nice to have more reason to care about them other than just exposition machines.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you in terms of that. I can understand sort of why it happened, but no, I do agree. The characters in this didn't really leave it.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
They know.
I mean, even just with the main characters, if we got a bit more flashbacks about their life on a colony before this,
would
have helped.
And what I did think was interesting that you just reminded me of now. Obviously, we're going to be in completely opposite opinions with this one, but you brought up flashbacks for Maxim, or just some more of his internal thoughts. What I found I ended up liking was that we didn't, well, not necessarily liking, but I thought was interesting, was that we didn't get the thought bubbles, we didn't get the narration from Maxim, but instead we had the panels looking at him moodily doing things and stuff like that. And I found it interesting because I was then sort of putting myself in his shoes and imagining what he was thinking.
But then it's you.
I know.
I mean, this is the problem with you remember Newt's Tale? I said it felt like Newt's Tale. One of the problems that a lot of people identified with Newt's Tale is that as soon as it gets to the point where Hadley's hope has fallen, it turns into basically a direct retelling of Aliens, and it doesn't take advantage much of the fact that it is meant to be from Newt's perspective. It just looks like a comic adaptation of Aliens instead of taking advantage of doing it from Rebecca Jordan's point of view. And that's what it's not as much of a problem here. But I just felt that doing it from a child's perspective, it wasn't taken advantage of as much as I would have liked. It's perfectly fine. I'm not saying it's a deal breaker. It's just I would have liked there to have been, because if you're doing that, it's not a deal breaker, but I just feel that being a story from a child's perspective, it would have benefited and resonated more with me as a reader if it had taken more of an advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see both of your arguments, really, Aaron. I think you kind of sold me with the whole, well, it's better that we don't get his internal thought process, but I still think you could have had a little more development. Like you see the scene where his mother is like, oh, this new job was supposed to get us out of this or whatever. And I think if we had more of that characters, and you saw it again with the designer Hogg conversation as well, like there was some character development there, and I get like it's this intense survival situation where it's a crowd of people, and yeah, and that's kind of the nature of the older couple as well too. They may just be red shirts, but it still just kind of shows to the whole fucked up nature of like not everyone in society is going to be fit for an extreme survival situation like that.
Yeah, I like the fact that there was an elderly. Not everyone is like a young age. That was actually a nice change.
But yeah, I mean that pretty much sums up my point. I think you're right, Aaron. I think it's good that we just kind of follow Max and the flashbacks might have been a bit much, but I still think we could have learned more about the history of the colony some way or another. If not flashbacks, then maybe something else.
That's actually something leading on from that. In terms of exposition and explanations, was something I didn't like that Gabriel did in the last issue, was giving us an explanation for the infestation. I thought that went against the idea of hitting the ground running. I didn't think it was necessary, and I don't think ultimately it matched up with sort of the start, because, in the very first issue, when you see him facehugger corpses, there's what looks like containers next to them, whereas it looks deliberate.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah,
and that's kind of a weird question. That's only really you only pick up on it for a moment, and not to mention they say, "Oh, the deal struck a colony with the Weyland-Yutani Corporation," which I was like, "Well, isn't this their colony? I guess it's not. I guess this is a government colony or something along those lines." But everyone seems to work for the company as well, so it's kind of like, well, were they researching these aliens here? Because they just said it was like storage hidden away in the atmosphere processor, which the atmosphere processor was cool to see more of the inside of that with the algae bloom scene and everything like that. But it's like, what are they doing with those aliens? Like, why are they being stored? Was this an outbreak test, kind of like we saw with those concept artist teases for the replay watch thing? Like, I don't know, but
yeah, that actually confused me. It's like you said, it didn't feel necessary. They could have just gone with trying to get to the exit. They didn't need an explanation of how it had come about, because there's 1,001 ways for you get one alien loose. It's like Ripley says, you only need one of them to get down there. But it ended up confusing me, because I thought, why are they just storing them? Why have they chosen a civilian colony to store them? Why not keep them in a contained lab? What's going on there? And there was no hint of... Go on.
Maybe they were storing them for an outbreak test. That was just a ruse to unleash them on the colony.
But then they said they were keeping them in storage, which infers extended length of time.
Yeah, the company could have lied to them just so they could, release them.
But then why even store them? Why not just release them? You don't need to bury them in those specialized units or anything.
I suppose then, because they'd be
plausible
blindsided.
deniability.
Well, yeah, and they would be blindsided. They wouldn't necessarily have precautions in place or knowledge of them, and it's just a natural, in quotation marks, test of the.
But again, you don't just shove them out the back of a shuttle. You don't need to. You've also got to get personnel to move them in there. That's another layer of it. It felt unnecessary.
Well, yeah,
the whole thing. I mean, we're just bullshitting here about coming up with things. We've got no idea what it was.
Yeah.
It just felt ultimately superfluous. There wasn't any need for it.
No argument.
It was this big thing of like why aliens were at the colony that was just kind of this throwaway line, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, so.
It's funny because our attitudes are sort of changing towards... There might have been a time where we were like, well, I need to know why everything happened, how this all happened, and then we've got things like this, and then we've got things like the Cold Forge, where it's like, I didn't actually need to know where the aliens came from. So, yeah, that's kind of funny to me.
I think it depends on the story. Like, again, I always kind of put it to the Alien versus Prometheus example, right? Like, Alien has really good ambiguity. It has questions in that movie that I don't want to be answered, whereas Prometheus, like, the plot hinges upon big questions that don't make sense, that never get answered. Like, there's a big difference between ambiguity that's effective and just enhances the mysterious atmosphere, and ambiguity that it's like, wait, that doesn't make sense within the context of the plot, or how would that really happen?
Mystery.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think our attitudes are shifting towards, needing to know why things happen, because, they're focusing, it seems like now, on telling more sort of self-contained stories where how it fits in with the rest of the universe doesn't necessarily so much matter. And probably also because we've seen things at this point like Fire and Stone, where they're really just picking things like LV-426 dry in terms of believability and plot. I'd rather it be ambiguous than them connive another way to get eggs off of LV-426.
Yeah, that's a completely valid point as well. You know, don't keep it too contained. Not everything has to come from the derelict or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like some of the nicer little contained older comics when it's just like people come across a random. I think one of my favorites is it's just called Alien. I think where it just deals with a completely extraterrestrial group of like tribal level creatures.
Yeah, that is Alien.
And it turns out it's like from the reader's perspective, it's clear that it's just like a human ship that had somehow got infected, happened to crash there, and they're just dealing with the problem. But it's just like a random other organism ship had it on and it crashed. It's like on The Thing. That's a film I gained something from every time I watch it. We don't need to know about what thing flew the flying saucer, what the backstory of that is. All that matters is that something was on it. We don't know what the civilization was, what they're called. It just happened to crash there. And the film works in, you don't need to know that. You just know there's a dangerous element in the story which has turned everything on its head, and the thing flows from there. You don't need the backstory. I think maybe if you had it, it might have diluted the story more.
Yeah, well, it's like Ultramuff said, isn't it? It's very dependent on the story as well that we're telling. But yeah, that's another wider conversation for another thing.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe. 5x5.
Ridgetop, do you want to lead us off? Final thoughts and a numbered score, please, sir.
I think it's a solid comic, and I will be picking up the paperback, and I hope there's some extra material in there to check out as far as the development and artwork of this comic goes. I'll probably give it a 7.5. I'm leaning towards an 8, but for me, it just didn't quite get there, but it's still a worthy Aliens comic, and I really enjoyed the artwork, especially the variant covers as well. I just think it's a solid comic in the universe that poses some interesting questions, and definitely well worth a read.
Xenomorphin?
I think probably 7-ish out of 10. I love the artwork. Plays around with a concept I've actually wanted to see played around with, but I think it could have benefited from doing things in a different way story-wise. But ultimately, there's nothing wrong with it as a story. It works for what it is. So yeah, it's likable. But things like the characters being not as strong, you got a problem when you have a non-speaking character, i.e. the alien is more memorable and has more of an impact on the story than the speaking characters. So I think it could have gone through another draft maybe of the script or whatever, but it's not a deal breaker, so it's likable for what it is.
I would say that it's a very solid little series. It has some great art. I think the series looks great. It plays around with some fun ideas, the DNA reflex. It's always good, a series that starts a conversation, even if it doesn't necessarily handle the question it raises in a way that's going to make everyone happy. I echo the 7 out of 10 sentiment. It's they could have done more with the characters, but the art is good, and it's just it's a fun short little series. And I like what Dark Horse has been doing, giving one writer, they write and draw the whole thing. It's given us some pretty fun series, so it's another in the line like Dead Orbit, that it's a good little mini, but it didn't blow my mind.
Now that's something we didn't actually talk about, but I will just mention in my own little review as well. I do love that we are getting these single creator sort of series at the minute, because I think it gives it a nice sort of cohesive vision. Obviously not quite the same situation as Dead Orbit, since Gabriel didn't colour this as well like Stokoe did. But it's still cool. I like that. We've got it with this, we've got it with Dead Orbit, and we've got it with William Gibson's Alien 3 as well. I do hope to continue to see that kind of stuff done, especially if it's the same sort of quality of artwork we've been seeing. I can't really disagree with anything anybody's said. It is solid. It's nice to see them playing with the lore, especially this aspect. I never saw this sort of come in. I didn't expect to see it be played with. Characters are not massively memorable. Would I like to see Maxon come back? Yeah, I like seeing damaged goods played with in these lore. It's nice to see the consequences of previous encounters come up. I think I mentioned that in some other stuff we've done, so I'd happily see him come back. But again, yeah, it's no hoop. There's nobody here I'm dying to see again. I was struggling with what to score this one. I was stuck between a 7 and an 8, simply because, again, how much of I loved the artwork in this, but I didn't think it was strong enough to give an 8 to, and in the end, but I also didn't think it was quite a 7, so I stole Ridgetop's suggestion and went for a 7.5, smack bang in the middle. But what about you guys who are listening, or girls? Any disagreements, any agreements, sound off, let us know what you're thinking. What have we've got William Gibson's Alien 3's last issue.
Yeah, when does that finish up?
As of recording, this Wednesday.
Really?
Yep.
It's out on Wednesday?
Yep.
Oh.
And then me and you will be doing an interview with Johnny Christmas on the Monday. Next Monday, sorry. A week on Monday.
A week from Monday.
Yeah.
Good. Did you want to bring up the LA thing?
Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. So that'll be our next episode, is the Johnny Christmas interview. And as Ridgetop has just alluded to, we've got a nice chunky piece of editorial that's just gone up, but I'll let him explain that since he's the one who's been slaving away.
So yeah, I was recently in Los Angeles and I got a chance to tour the Alien 40th Anniversary exhibit being put on by University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts and the Visions and Voices initiative of the school. And we got a tour from the curator of the exhibit, Alex Ago, and it was just an awesome time. I met up with a former staffer there, Mike Monahan, who's a professional photographer now, and he and I just took loads of pictures and some video, and I put together a comprehensive article that you can check out on our website. It has written elements where I just go through my experience at the exhibit, as well as the photo galleries of the images we took, and a video tour that I put together with narration from Alex taking you through the whole thing. And I also got a chance to interview Alex as well after that. So I've been working on that for quite a bit. So if you guys are curious, if you're not able to make it to LA before it closes on the 12th, we tried as hard as we could to give you the experience of it without being there. So hope you enjoy that. But surprisingly enough, I will be going back to LA tomorrow. Fox is doing a premiere for some of the fan sites of the fan films coming out next month. I believe they're all being released.
End of March.
Yeah. Or really? That soon? All of them? I thought they were doing like one
a
after
week.
the other.
It's one a week starting next Friday.
Okay. So we'll get a bit of an early peek on that. So keep an eye out for our thoughts as well.
And something else I just wanted to mention as well, because I'm really excited about this one, was Xenomorph and I recorded a really fun interview with Carrie Henn that we will be releasing on Alien Day. So also keep an eye out for that. That will be episode 85. Okay, so that's pretty much everything from us. Thanks for listening. Be sure to sound off with any thoughts and whatever on the episode. Hit us up on emails, hit us up on the relevant posts on wherever social media you're seeing this, or on the forum itself. Ultramorph, where can folk find you online?
You can find me over on the forums, obviously Ultramorph, and also on Twitter. I'm GRNBRNDD12, and Mike Green. I'm on the most of the Facebook groups.
And I can't be asked to do our personal ones because we're not that important. But in terms of our... No, you are all important, really. I love you all. But in terms of the site socials, we are on Twitter as @AvP Galaxy. Same for Facebook. Alien vs Predator Galaxy will also bring that up. Alien vs Predator Galaxy on Instagram. YouTube is Alien vs Predator Galaxy as well. And the website URL is just avpgalaxy.net. This has been Corporal Hicks.
And Ridgetop.
Xenomorphine.
And Ultramorph.
Signing off.